Next up, I want to introduce another dedicated New Hampshire Rebellion walker. Bruce Skarin went on the very first journey from Dixville Notch down to Nashua, the whole 140 cold miles 2 Januaries ago. Since then, he's walked across Massachusetts as a candidate for state representative there, and he's now working on a project called Equal Citizens, which was inspired by the Equal Citizens Act in Professor Lawrence Lessig's campaign run. Bruce is wonderful and just about set up with tech. Here he is.
Thanks, Annie. Well, good morning. It's a real privilege here to be able to talk about walking the talk here for the New Hampshire Rebellion. And my walk actually kind of started back in 2010 with the birth of this little guy. This is my first of 2 boys. And he got me really thinking about the things that were going on, and it got me asking this question, well, what kind of future are we creating for our children? And so as anyone that is taking care of a child knows, there's a lot that we need to do to take care of the future. And as a scientist, one of the things that I was naturally drawn to is this fact that, we have a planet that is now warming with an increasingly dangerous amount of momentum behind it. And that is largely in part because of this dependence on a finite resource that is only getting less efficient and more risky to extract. And yet at the same time, we have this national debt that's growing without bounds. And while these problems are growing and growing, we also have this, amazing technology growth that's taking place. And again, as a scientist, it really led me to asking this question, well, if we have these capabilities, we understand the problem, why aren't we doing things about it? And that, of course, led me to Congress, because Congress is supposed to represent the people. And this is clearly a set of problems that affect each and every one of us here in this country, but also around the world. And after looking at Congress for a little while, of course, that led me to the fact that it doesn't represent the people, it represents the funders. And I learned the great deal amount about this from our good dear friend that we all know and love, Larry Lessig. And what I really liked is that he stripped away all the sugarcoating. He said it was like an alcoholic being referred to as someone with a liquid intake problem. This is not campaign finance, this is corruption, all right? And what I, again, as a scientist really loved is that he talked about the system of corruption. This is not just one silver bullet that's going to fix everything for us magically. This is a complicated problem. So fast forward to 2014, and he talked about it in a way that was so convincing that when he introduced this amazing, beautiful woman that walked 3,200 miles across our country, I thought, well, sure, I'm a young enough, healthy enough guy. I can certainly walk 185 miles from Dixville Notch all the way down to Nashua, except that it was going to be done in January. And so it was cold, and it was hard, but it was also amazingly beautiful. Not just the scenery, just the chance to unplug going down a road with the blinders on, but actually see the world around me. And I met beautiful, amazing people like Mike McCarthy here, a combat medic from Afghanistan that drew this amazing portrait freehand with permanent marker one night, staying up. Or Gabriel Grant, who's also helped develop a lot of the technology for the New Hampshire Rebellion. And really an amazing, amazing group of people that were truly dedicated to making sure that in this presidential election, campaign finance and corruption were the #1 issue that people were talking about. All right. It was inspiring. And so, as all normal, sane, inspired people do, by the end of the walk, I went out and I announced that I had decided to run as an independent for the United States Senate in Massachusetts, right? And so when I was getting ready to kind of launch my campaign, I had lunch with Larry, and he kind of sat me down and he said, "Wow, this is great. You know, I'm glad you're so inspired. But really, do you want to run for the U.S. Senate? I mean, is that something that seems reasonable?" And I said, "Well, this election has got an incumbent that kind of just slid in there. It's expected to be not at all competitive, and there's this growing independent party or independent group of people." That now are over half of the population in Massachusetts that are enrolled for either party, and I don't feel like they're getting represented, and that this issue is not important enough. And so he said again, you know, really, is this something you think you should do? So I said, you know, Ed Markey's not such a bad guy, but you know, he's not really that much of a remarkable guy either necessarily. And when I ran a poll, it said that, you know, again, half of people really wanted to see an independent candidate. So I thought this was an amazing opportunity. So I planned a 1,000-mile route. And I walked 340 miles. I collected over 4,000 signatures. I met a lot of amazing people. I took zero special interest dollars. I actually took very few dollars, period. And I had that chance to move this issue forward. So now if we fast forward to 2015, I sat down with Larry for lunch again in the summer, and he said, you know, I'm really seriously thinking about running for president of the United States. And this time it was my turn, even though we were sitting in the exact same spots in the exact same table. And the tables were turned, and it was me who was going, okay, Larry, I'm 100% behind you, but you know, really, President of the United States? That's kind of ambitious, even for you. And he said, well, you know, it doesn't really matter if I win or not, really, because we just need to make a campaign that is focused on this fact that the core principles of representative democracy is that we are all equal citizens and that corruption creates second-class citizens. And that really kind of, again, made me think, you know, well, you know, as citizens, are we equal? And I would think, you know, well, sure, we all have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of religion. We all have the right to assemble and protest. We have the right to bear arms. We each get just one vote. We're entitled to due process under the law, unless you can afford to be above the law, but that's beside the point. And nobody really escapes all taxes, right? And I also had just completed, from the scientist's perspective, all this research about, you know, the data that kind of described the complexities of this problem and how they interacted and changed. And I don't have time to go into all the details here, but I have a great video that gets into, as Larry put it, very nerdy details about the complexities of this problem and how we actually can solve it. It's really not as bad as we think. But that all led me to this kind of Orwellian conclusion that, you know, all citizens are, we like to say that all citizens are equal, but the truth is some citizens are more equal than others. And that if we really want to be equal, and we want to be equal citizens in a representative democracy, we have to do three things. You know, Larry outlined these three things. And the first is we have to stop politicians and partisans from drawing the lines so that they can make 85% of the seats in the House safe for the incumbent or their party. And to do that, we should take a very serious look at the Ranked Choice Voter Act that's been put together, Fair Vote, and see whether or not it is a thing that can solve this problem. Number two, we have to take on the fact that more and more money is required to be the winning campaign for the House. And that a growing amount of that is coming from PACs and now super PACs and dark money and all these terrible things, and completely dwarfing this under $200. And believe it or not, it is there. It's just, you know, this little tiny sliver that's just completely squished by all that big money. And to do that, our good friends at Issue 1 have put out the Blueprints for Democracy, and they've assembled the Reformers Caucus, and they're going to hopefully be putting together some legislation very soon that goes into all the intricate details for solving this problem of money in politics once and for all. And the last thing we have to do is realize that in a modern day and age, we need to be making voting easier and easier, not more and more hard. This should be something that's automatic. It's just, and for that, you know, we have already bills introduced in Congress, the Voting Rights Advancement and Voting Empowerment Acts of 2015. They should have been passed in 2015. We can definitely pass them right now, and hopefully after Democracy Spring, that will happen. And if we do these three things, we can once again be equal citizens. And that's important so that we can have a Congress that, as Madison famously said in Federalist 52, that is dependent upon the people alone. And that while the road may be long and sometimes hard and sometimes cold and lonely, that this is a fight that is absolutely worth fighting for, because we need to fix democracy first. And so I hope you'll visit equalcitizens.us, where we're taking a very hard look at those three reforms, and we hope to make these things, again, a key part of the 2016 elections. And with that, I just want to thank the organizers here again, once again, just the chance to talk about walking the talk. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I am so glad that you reached out to us. Bruce has walked many miles, as you heard, and it's a joy for us as the organizers of the rebellion to have these long-distance walkers returning for this finale before the primary and sharing some of their story. We hope that you draw not just a lot of good information from panels and speakers, but also some inspiration from people like Bruce, who has truly been walking the talk as a candidate, as an activist, and so on.